Hi there. Today I want to show you how to do some repairs on a basket. I have a basket here. The rim has begun to come undone. You can see the lashing is has broken off and it's really loose. The seagrass is falling out. So I want to show how to take off the old rim and set a new rim up to lash. And then I'll also go over how to put in new handles for this handle basket. This basket is meant to have a handle on both sides, and this second handle just broke off. So I'll reinforce the handles and then go over how to do the rim. So the materials and tools you'll need is, you'll start with a 1/4 inch flat oval reed, and then I have a 5/8 inch flat oval reed here for the handles. You'll want a spray bottle and a bin of water. I have my basket shears, a box knife, and my straight tip packer for lashing. So I'll set those aside. So the first thing you're going to do is remove the current rim. And since we probably won't be saving this lashing because we want to use new lashing, I'll go in here and just cut at the base of each of the lashing stitches. So going here underneath the rim, this edge here is the rim, and clipping each of these lashing bits off. And then I can pull them out from where they're tucked in and just create a little pile that you can throw away later. Okay, and you can also go in, if you don't want to cut each one, you can just untwist or untwine it by pulling it through the loops here like so. And then at some point when it gets too long, break it off or cut it off to continue. So when you come to the point where it's tucked over, folded over and into the basket, go ahead and break that off so that you can keep going. And this is a very brittle reed. This is an older basket, and so the reed is cracking pretty easily as I pull it off. It's kind of just disintegrating as I go. Okay, so I'll take off the outer rim, and I'm going to save the outer rim and the inner rim and the seagrass pieces. Set those aside. Empty out the basket of all the bits and pieces. I have 2 smaller pieces that go in the handle and then 2 larger pieces that go on either side of the handle. And then I'm going to pull out this handle. You might have to use your packer or a screwdriver or something to get in there and separate the layers. Pull that out. And then I have the broken pieces on this side that I'll lift out. This is the remainder of the broken handle. I'll pull these out as well. And it can be a little tricky, especially if you've stained or sealed your basket, because the stain or sealer sometimes sticks the reed together. So working at it carefully so you don't break the reed that you're leaving behind. This one really doesn't want to come out. There we go. Okay, so everything's removed and we're ready to reset the rim. Once you've taken all of the rim off your basket, you'll be ready to reset the rim. And to do that, I have a number of plastic clamps. I like using these plastic clamps. I also use metal clamps for basket weaving. But the nice thing about using the plastic clamps is they have this nice space in the center that works really well for wrapping around the rim as you're putting the layers together without causing indentations in the rim. So using the metal clamps, the inside, there's not as much space and it usually creates a crease or a mark in the reed. So I like having the plastic clamps for creating the rim. Every other time I use the metal clamp. So I have at least 4 of the plastic clamps to set up the rim. And now I'm going to put this upside down in a bin of water to get the top of the rim wet to start soaking so that it's pliable and easy to use. So I'm going to dump it over here. It's not a lot of water exposure. You just want to kind of dip it in there for a few seconds and then shake it off. And the reed will continue to soak in that water as you let it sit. So now set this aside and I'm going to inspect the rim reed that I took off. This is the original reed and I can see some lines where the lashing wrapped around, and these lines were caused both from the stain or sealer that I used on the basket, probably a clear sealer. And then also the time. Reed starts to turn a little browner and darken over time. And so you can see the difference here between the part of the reed that it was exposed to light and the part that's hidden behind the lashing. So these are pretty good pieces still, but I think that I want to put on a new rim so that the quality of the rim is a little bit better and it will hold the basket together longer. So I'm going to use this as just a reference and set this aside just as a reference and use a different piece of rim. Use a different piece of reed for the rim. And this piece is slightly thicker than what I was using before, but that will be okay because I have a 3/8 inch top weaver here. And when I put the 5/8 inch rim on top and then I put the seagrass in, the seagrass will go into that extra space that's between the two and fill that space. And then we'll lash the layers together. So this will be a good rim size. So now for the rim, I'm going to measure out around the outside of the rim. And this is just basic setting up a rim process like you would do for any basket. So I'm just walking the reed around the rim of the basket and putting some clamps in place so that I end up getting a piece that's the length that I want. And I'm going to overlap the rim here by 2 inches. So I'm estimating 2 inches. I'm going to cut that off and then take it off and use this as a guide to cut a second piece for the inner rim. So I'll use this, slide along my other reed and cut a second piece. Okay, so now I have an inner rim and an outer rim, and this is pretty thick reed, so I need to soak it for a couple minutes. So I'll stick this in the water to soak while I get the handles set up. Put this aside. Okay, so I have a 4 pieces for the handle cut, and I used my old handle as a guide. So flatten this out and then cut 4 pieces the same length as my original handle. And the reason I want to do 4 is because the original handle was just 1 piece curved around and then stuck into the side of the basket. This time I want to curve around 1 piece to create the handle, and then I'm going to curve another piece inside so that it ends up being double layered and curved on both sides. The flat oval facing up here and the flat oval facing down here. So you end up with more of a rounded handle, and that will be slightly sturdier. So this reed, because it's so thick, is gonna be a little bit challenging to get into the basket and to hold in place. So again, dump these into your bucket of water, allow them to soak for a few minutes. I'd say about 3 to 5 minutes to allow them to soak in all the water so that they're extra pliable. So then set aside the rest of your materials and pull out a piece of the 1/4 inch flat oval for the lashing. That will be the last step we work on, but you can pull that out now while you're waiting to soak your reed. Okay, so I'm going to pull out the handles now. They've been soaking, and I'm going to start by inserting the pieces on the outside, the pieces that are the outside of the handle. So start by creating a U shape, folding them in half, and creating a bend in the reed by just working it through your hands and bending it, creating a curve throughout the reed so that it more easily forms your U shape. And then I'm going to go to the outside of the basket where I took the original handles off. So I can see that because the stakes are slightly lighter than the other stakes. That's where the stain and sunlight haven't impacted the reed yet. So now I'm going to take this end and tuck it in using my straight tip packer to tuck it down into the layers right on top of a stake. So I'm going in right on top of a stake here, down to the rows of the seagrass. And if your basket doesn't have seagrass, or it's just rows of reed, what you're looking to do is put it down enough rows that it's woven into the basket and it's sturdy. It won't just pull out. So here that's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then into the seagrass about 7 rows worth of weaving. 7 rows that it's overlapping. There's more rows going behind. Okay, so I'm going to tuck this into here, into the seagrass, so that it's kind of hidden, and then fold it over, and on this side do the same as well. Tuck it underneath along the stake, and this is where you might have to manhandle it a little bit because the reed is going to be tough to create that U and hold in that space. And I'm using my straight tip packer to lift up the rows as I go so that I can slide it under each row. Okay, so there is the outside of the handle. Now what I'm going to do for the inside is you're reversing the U shape. So instead of the oval side facing out, you're going to do the flat side facing out. So create the bend, add the curve into the reed by bending it backwards. It doesn't really want to curve this direction, so work gently, just kind of coax it into the shape that you want it to be. And now we'll be working on the inside of the basket, right on the other side of the stake we just put it into, and tucking it in here. Tucking it in here, and then setting it inside the handle, and then tucking it in on this side as well. But first I'm going to trim down one of these ends so that it's easier to put in to the behind the stake. So I'll trim that down just a bit. And then go in here with my straight tip packer. Lift up some of the rows and tuck that in. And on this side, I'm just gonna go down into these top rows here. I'm not gonna go all the way down into the seagrass. So then fold it in, tuck it into the handle that's already there, like so. And then you can see where you're going to end. And so I'll go in here and I'll trim the handle down to the bottom of this last row here using my shears. I'll just create a little clip where that end is and then pull it out so that I can grab it better. And trim that down. Okay, and then trim down the end of this piece as well. And when using a knife, be sure to cut away from yourself so you don't cut your hand on accident. Okay, so trim that down a bit, and then I'll go in like so. And again, the second side is always a little bit harder because you're trying to force it into a certain shape. I'm gonna lift up the rows and just scooch it into the space that I want it to be in, right on top of the stake on the inside. And you're pressing it down into these rows until it can sit inside the handle again. And then go ahead and pull up so that it's nice and form fitted to the outside of the handle. And so there is handle 1. Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing to the other side. Okay, so I have the other side of the handle done. If you want to watch that again, go ahead and scroll back and rewatch the first handle to do the second handle. Check the height of your handles because one might be higher than the other. So go ahead and set it on your table and look at it from straight on so that you can see where the handles are. And you can press one down or pull one up so that they're more even if that's a problem. Okay, so the next thing I'm gonna do here really quickly before I start the rim is go in and make sure everything's tucked in. If there's reed that's coming out of the top here, I'm gonna go in and tuck in the ends and just make sure that everything is where I want it to be in order to create the rim. So that looks good there. Now my rim has been soaking for quite a while and it's ready to be taken out of the water and applied to the outside of the basket. So I'll take both out and tap them out onto my towel here and then pull out my knife, and I'm going to trim one of the ends down about 1.5 inches in length and go down to about half as thick as it is. So the dome here, that is the oval part of the flat oval reed, I'm going to trim that off, and then that will allow us to overlap 2 ends and not have it be as bulky. So I'm gonna go in here like we did on the handle earlier and trim down that dome, get it down to a flat reed shape, just a couple slices off, and then about 1.5 inches distance down the rim. Okay, so I've got it pretty flat there. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to set up the outside rim first. So to do that, take the rim and apply it on top of that first weaver, overlap here, and using a clamp it in place, and then move around the top of the basket, putting a clamp every quarter turn quarter turn, holding the rim with your hand so that it's tight against the basket all the way around. Quarter turn and a clamp, a quarter turn and a clamp. And then when you come back to where you overlap, we'll trim down the length of the reed so that it just overlaps where that 1.5 inch that we trimmed down is. We'll overlap and trim this end off so that it meets and overlaps there. And then I like to trim the corners off of this reed to kind of create a rounded end, like so. Okay, and then clamp that in place. And then we'll do the inside of the basket rim, doing the same thing, slicing off the dome. Okay, and then inserting this side opposite of where we did the outside. So the outside rim overlaps here. We're going to overlap the inside rim here. And first, work your reed the opposite direction so that the flat oval is facing down and the curve is on the flat side. Because again, kind of like the handles, you're trying to curve the reed a way that it doesn't really naturally curve. Okay, so I'm gonna take this clamp off and then replace it so that it's covering the outside rim and holding the inside rim in place. And then I'll thread this rim around. Every time I need to clamp, lift it up and re-clamp it so that it covers the outside rim, the basket wall, and the inside rim. And then when you come to the overlap, be sure to hold the outside or the outside overlap edge, this piece here, in place so that it doesn't fling out. Then hold all those layers together with the clamp and come around here, clamp that together. And then again, on the inside, you're going to go in and trim that down so that it's just overlapping where you trimmed that end down. And then trim this so that it's rounded, cut off the corners, and then cut off the corners again. So I end up with a rounded end there, and then tuck that in. Okay, and then I have the original seagrass pieces here from when the first time this basket was made. And so I'm going to just go ahead and insert these in. I have short pieces to go inside the handle, and because we did an inside handle, this will need to be trimmed down a little bit. Insert that into the top so that it tucks between the outside rim and the inside rim right on top of the basket wall. And then put that in place with the clamp. And then I'll use the longer piece to do the outside here. I'm gonna thread it around like so, and then replace my clamp. And this, it can splay out on the ends here. That's okay, we'll come back around, and when we lash it, it will hold everything together. And then this piece for the handle again, we'll need to trim this down a little bit. And I'm trimming it down just enough that it sits inside of the handle, right on top of the basket, and then the rim will come up on either side and sandwich it in like so. Okay, and then the last side, this side's a little trickier because we have the outside rim to hold in place. So just put it in place there and then clamp everything back together. Okay, so your rim is all set up and ready to go. Now you'll do the lashing to hold everything in place. And at each of these points at the handle, these 2 points here and these 2 points here, we will create an X in the lashing process to stabilize and hold the handles tightly in place. So go ahead and put your 1/4 inch flat oval reed into the water and allow it to soak for a few minutes, and then we'll get the lashing started. Okay, for the lashing, grab out your lashing reed, tap it out on your work surface, and then pull out a piece that wraps around the top of the basket 2.5 times. So once I figure out what this is doing, go around your basket like so, around the top, one wrap where they meet up, and then 2 wraps, they meet up again, and this is 3 wraps. So this will be a long enough piece of reed. Going around 3 times ensures you'll have enough length for your lashing reed that you don't have to put another piece of lashing reed into the rim or start a new lashing reed for the rim. So this will allow you to use the same piece throughout the whole process. So I'll set this extra piece aside. Okay, so flat oval reed, as I said earlier, has a rounded side and a flat side, hence the name. So we're going to take the rounded side and we want that up throughout the whole process of the lashing. So I'm going to take it in here, and starting on the side where the rim overlap is on the outside, I'm going to go just to one side of that. So the overlap is here. I'm going to go just to the side of that and tuck this in between the layers of the rim and the inside rim and the basket. So I'm going between or right over, going right over a stake here, but on the inside like so. So it's tucking right in there, and I'm going to push that down so that I have enough to come up and loop around and go back into the basket. So I'm creating a little cinch or a basket knot to hold that reed in place, so then I'm able to do the lashing. So that will hold that end in place nice and snug so that it doesn't come undone as I'm working. So now lashing is worked underneath the first row of weaving. So I have this last row of weaving that I'm going to be putting the lashing into the spaces between each stake. So these are the stakes running up and down the basket, the spaces in between. I'll be creating a space with my straight tip packer to thread the lashing through and loop it around the rim. So we'll be doing a whip stitch around the rim to hold all the rim together, and it completes the basket, holds everything in place, and creates a nice finish for your basket. So to do that, thread this reed through your hand so that the flat oval or the oval side is on your thumb, and the underside, the flat side, is on your forefinger. And so I'm going to thread that through, making sure to keep that orientation, the oval side up, flat side down, all the way the length of the reed. And the reason you do that is that now we're going to create a space here right underneath where we did that tie. We're going to stick it into that space and then thread it through, carefully making sure we keep that orientation. And we keep the orientation oval side up throughout the whole length of the reed so that we don't come to the end here and have a twist in the reed. If it was wrong, it would get twisted like this, and that would be hard on the reed and start to break the reed down, and it ends up not looking as nice when you're finished. So I'm going to replace the layers here and then create my first stitch, making sure all of my layers where they need to be. The end that I started with is tucked here to the side, and then my seagrass is right floating on top of the basket, and my stitch is like so, right in that first space. And I want to be very tight on these stitches because I want the rim to be close together. And as the reed dries, it begins to shrink. So it's very important to get the stitches tight now because it will shrink slightly as it dries, which will cause a loose rim, and you don't want that to happen because it's easier to break, which is why we're doing a repair in the first place. Okay, so again, to create a stitch, put your straight tip packer in that space under the first row that's hidden behind the rim and the second row, so that we're creating a space there, and threading it through and pull all the way through. So then angle your stitch the way you want it angled, and then set your basket up, and you want to carefully pull tight. So you have to use quite a bit of force to pull tight, but not so much force that you end up breaking the reed as you're pulling on it. And then hold it in place with this hand so that you're crimping it between your finger and the rim so that it doesn't move, and then glide it through your hands with the other hand to keep that orientation of the flat side down, oval side facing up. And again, using your tool, create a space, thread it through, and pull all the way through. And then pull tight, like so. So you get a nice tight stitch there. And as you come close to the overlaps, you'll want to eventually move the clamp out of your way, but you don't want everything coming undone before you're ready, before it's held in place by the lashing. So just shift it around until it's out of your way. Shift the clamp around until it's out of your way. So this stitch will hold the rim layers together, and then we can move the clamp. So put it there in between, like so. Pull it through. And it might get looped around, and this isn't because the orientation is wrong, it's just the way it twists around as you pull through. So just twist it back so that it's reoriented correctly, and then pull through and pull tight, and that will hold our layers together. And I can lift this clamp off. That will hold in place. Okay, so we're going to do this up until we reach the handle, and then I'll show you the X stitch. And since this is a basket we're repairing, there are already spaces built into that between the top row and the second row down. So sometimes you could just stick it in without even needing to use your tool to create a hole or create the space. Okay, so I'm up to where I'll be putting a stitch next to the handle. So I'll put a stitch right here, right next to the handle, and pull tight. And this stitch is especially important to pull tight because the handle creates an extra space here. So you want to pull that as tight as you can without breaking the lashing. And then bring this around right up against the edge of the handle. And you're going to put it into the next space on the other side of the handle. Like so. Thread it through and pull tight right over the handle. And then thread through the handle here and guide it through your hand so that you're keeping the oval side up. And then we're gonna go back and put another stitch into this space, like so, and create an X over that handle. And that will stabilize the handle so that it is held tighter into the rim, and also adds a visual interest. Okay, so then pull through the handle again, and we'll do another stitch through this hole as well. So there ends up being a stitch right next to it. Like so. There we go. And you want to make sure also that you're catching the seagrass into the rim as you're lashing, so that the ends are tucked down underneath the lashing. Okay, and then every once in a while you want to stop and wind up your lashing reed and spray it down with your water bottle, and this keeps it damp so that it doesn't get extra hairs as you're pulling it through, and keeps it pliable to work with. And then you can keep going around, and in the handle here we're going to have to thread it through the handle and then continue the stitches as we've been doing, and we'll catch the other side of the handle in an X as well. Pull tight. Then I'll lift this clamp up. So I'm pulling through the handle first, and then orienting my reed correctly, and then creating a stitch. Okay, so this is the last stitch before the X. So do this last stitch and then thread through the handle again. Orient your reed and create one side of the X, putting the reed on the other side of the handle. So we came up next to the handle. Now we're gonna go down the other side. Pull tight. And then this seagrass is kind of lifted out, so I'm going to tuck that back into place and then go over. I'm holding everything in place with my hand here so that the lashing reed doesn't pull out and loosen. Pull through and tighten. Okay, and then we'll create another stitch in this first one right next to it, or in the same hole here as the X lands. Get in there. Okay, and then continue to lash around the reed, doing the same steps on the other side of the handle, and I'll show you how to end when you get to the end here. Okay, so when you're at the final stitch for your lashing, you've come up so that every space has a stitch. you're going to create another loop knot like we did originally. So you can cut off a length of the excess. So I have about 5 inches of length here. I'm gonna cut that off here, and then take my straight tip packer and create a space between the inside rim and the basket, and fold this into the basket and down to create a loop around the rim there. So now I have 2 ends, one from where I started and one from where I ended here. And so I'll take those, and I can either trim them down so that there's a little bit of a tail so that they hold in place, or tuck them into the reed along one of the stakes. So I'll take this packer and come in here and lift up some weavers and tuck it in. And if it's too wet, or sorry, too dry, spray it down so that it's easier to move around. Tuck it in. Keep going until you can pull it out. Okay, so you're going to tuck it in and then pull from the bottom until it's tight in its space, like so. And then I'll thread the next one into the same space right next to it. And then pull that down as well, so that's tight. And then go ahead and pull them together so that they're hidden behind that stake, like so. And then trim the ends so that they just peek out, so that they're hidden in there like so. Okay, so the rim is completed, and as you can tell, the original rim has aged and has been sealed, and so it's a slightly different color. This is a darker tan than the new reed that we applied. So allow this to dry for 24 hours. The rim is rather thick and you want it to completely dry before you do any finishing. And then to get it to a similar color, use a matching sealer or stain, and stain or seal just the part that you reapplied, and then allow that to sit for the manufacturer's instruction, that length of time that they say on the can of the material you use. And then you can wash your basket to get the whole thing clean, get all the oils off of it using soap and water and a scrub brush. Just get it all clean, and then do another coat of stain over the whole thing so that it's more of the same color. And that will make the new reed match better with the original reed. You will still have a little bit of a color difference, because part of the difference of your original basket is that it has aged in light, and so the color just naturally changes. The newer reed won't change at the same rate. So yeah, you can do some of the matching with a stain or a sealer, but some of it will look a little bit different depending on the age of the basket. And that is the repair for a rim and handles on the top of a round basket. You can use the same process for pretty much any shape of basket that has this type of lashed rim. You just remove the old rim. You can either use the same materials or use new material like I did. This one, I used the new reed and the old seagrass and made new handles. Also, these handles can be applied to rectangular baskets, other types of round baskets. This makes a great carrying device. I would not put heavy items in your basket with this type of handle and expect these handles to withstand that kind of weight. They will eventually slide out if you're carrying too much weight, but light things like blankets or tablecloths, lighter items, I wouldn't put glass jars or things like that that are heavy and lift here. But these will be pretty sturdy for a lot of other options. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, subscribe below to my channel and check out textileindy.com for more basket weaving, natural dyeing, and other fiber arts. And leave a comment if you have any questions. Thanks.